This is the Insider's Guide to Real Estate. I'm Victor Normand, and I'm your host. Today, we go inside the home inspection. My guest today is Andy Consoli, who's president of ABC Home Inspection. Andy is also an instructor who teaches home inspection to prospective inspectors. So he's really an authority on the subject. So please join me in welcoming Andy to our show. Andy, thanks so much for being here.
You too, thanks for having me.
So home inspection is, as its name implies, it is used almost exclusively when people buy homes, and again, almost exclusively by home buyers, although home sellers can use it. Before we get into the home inspection, let's talk about the home inspector. What's involved in getting a license to become a home inspector?
Sure, people call me all the time. Contractors who may want to get into the business, or a lot of folks who've never been involved in it at all. They want to become home inspectors. But in the old days, there was no license. But for about 15 years now, you have to have a license. And you have to perform 125 home inspections with a senior inspector before you are eligible to get your actual license to do it on your own. Now, you got to think about how long it would take to get 125 inspections under your belt. Normally, you could probably get 2 a week, possibly. So it would take quite a long time to get that under your belt. And home inspection companies aren't going to be paying. They may, but many don't pay you to train with them. Many of them charge you to train with them. Okay. So a lot of folks believe that they should be paid, but it's by training with a home inspector, it's as if you're going to college. You have to pay. And I've seen inspectors charge anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 to allow you to shadow.
So it's an apprenticeship, is it?
It's an apprenticeship. You have to pay for it. And then you also have to go to school and get 80 hours of education. And then you have to pass national exams. All in all of my guys, none of them were able to become a licensed person until 3 years. Took about 3 full-time years.
So that's typical.
That's typical. If you're on the fast track, it could be 1.5, but it takes a while.
Takes a while. So what kind of background would somebody have?
Somebody should have. They should have. They have to be, at least they have to be 18. They have to have graduated high school. They should have a background in maybe an electrician or a plumber or a contractor, building contractor, carpenter, that type of. Some people don't. Or an engineer would be pretty good. Civil engineer, structural.
So somebody who's got a trade background.
A trade background helps quite a bit.
Okay. So now home inspections. What's the process? I mean, is there a certain methodology that one uses, or is it pretty individualized? No,
we have a scope we follow. Home inspectors are required to follow 266 CMR. It's the law. And the inspector is required to follow this very strict guideline. We're not allowed to miss. Well, for instance, we have around 150 items we have to look at every home. And we can't miss one, or we could lose our license. For instance, we have to comment on the type of foundation. Is it stone? Is it concrete? Is it block? If we fail to fill that field in, we didn't tell the client that it was one or the other. We left it empty. That alone could be a license on probation. That's an issue. So every single item we look at is required by the law. Now, most home inspection companies go above and beyond the minimum standards. We go way above the minimum. The minimum is the minimum. We'd rather rise to a higher level by testing things like, we will look at the stove and the oven in the refrigerator and dishwasher, not required by home inspection law. We will check every single window in the home, every one of them, not required. You only have to check a representative number of windows per room. Same thing with outlets, just a representative number. We'll check all of them that aren't obstructed by furniture. So there's a routine. You have to do it. You have to do it right.
Yeah, top to bottom, outside.
Top to bottom, inside, outside, the grading and the rooftop, attic. For instance, this morning I was poking around a crawl space and I found termite damage. There was underneath the steps of a split. Pay attention, if you people own a split, look underneath the steps of the split and you'll find the only access to the sills. In a split home, everything's finished.
Sure.
So you can't see much. But under that step is where you will see something. If it's going to be there, that's probably where it'll be. And termite damage, wood rot, soaking wet. They have to jack this whole area of the home up and remove the front stairway to get to it. It's a big problem.
Big problem. But home inspectors aren't doing anything invasive. In other words, you're not poking holes in walls.
We're not allowed to. We have to probe all the sills that we can get to, but we're not allowed to probe the trim, the finished materials.
Now, why is that?
That would be evasive. That would be damaging the baseboards on someone's home. That's the final finished product. So we would be able to probe around it, but not damage somebody's property. I've had people screaming at me. They want to kick me out of the house because the sill has, when I leave, the sill is completely broken, wide open with evidence. There's termite damage, or carpenter ant damage. So when I probe, it's not solid, it's hollow. So of course, it's going to be damaged when I leave.
Right.
It was defected. No one noticed it until I noticed it. And they then think that we did the damage, we caused the problem. No, the problem was pre-existing. I found the problem.
Sure. So you're in the basement, the attic. You're in the you can't get behind the walls, but you can get to unfinished spaces and make some judgments
We have
based
to.
on that.
We're required to look at all areas that we can get to. Attic down to the cellar, all that.
Now, what about things like mold and is that part of a typical home inspection?
The home inspection law excludes it, but a home inspector that has been trained properly will be able to identify it if they see it. We're not even allowed to say it's mold. We have to say suspected mold.
Okay.
Now, I'm a certified mold person, so I could come in and say, in my opinion, this is mold. I'm certified to say that. But many inspectors are not. Inspecting law, even though I'm certified in mold, I still do not have to comment on it technically. But that's a disservice to my client. All of my inspectors are told, if you see it, if you smell it, talk about it, write it down, and recommend further evaluation. Mold is expensive to clean up. See, the problem is mold can't always be identified. You don't always know it's there. On a decent day, you won't smell anything. But on a damp day, you'll pick up an odor that you didn't yesterday. Mm-hmm. It's hard to tell if it's actually there or not until you have the perfect weather condition.
So a lot of the things that you inspect for, if you suspect that something is not right, you just note that. It's not necessary for you to confirm whether it's something that's wired incorrectly or plumbing that's not done.
Well, the home inspection law says our job is to identify an issue. We don't have to explain why it's defected or how to fix it. We identify. We open the electrical panel. I see some wires that aren't installed correctly. I would note wires are not installed correctly. Contact electrician for correction. That's what we do. People will ask us, what do we do? I said, well, what you do is you get on the phone and you call an electrician. And the electrician will tell you what it costs to fix it.
Right. So let's just go back to, you've just driven up to a property, you check the outside of a house. What are some of the things you're required to look at on the outside?
Sure. Let's think about it. The siding, the fascia boards, the boards on the face of a home or up on the gables, the rake boards. Most folks don't know what a rake is, but it's a fascia board on the side of a house. All the siding, the roofing, the chimney. We take a look at the plumbing vents that come through the roof. This morning, the chimney needed repointing, meaning the mortar was popping out. The fascia boards were damaged by carpenter bees, so they're going to have to be pulled off and replaced. The siding it was texture 111 and they didn't flash it correctly, so water's getting behind the wall. So just that alone. We look at, of course, the bushes touching the house. That will cause the walls to stay wet, insect problems.
Yep, sure. What about things like driveways,
Absolutely,
walkways?
not required, but we do.
Okay.
So we look at the driveway. This morning's driveway was not in great shape. And we'll comment on, I know a driveway is expensive. And my buyer may not be focused on that. Even though the reg says I don't really have to do it, you're paying me to inspect your home. I'd rather look at it, make a note, bring your attention to it, and make sure you're aware that it may need work.
Okay.
Walkways are more important than driveways. You can trip on a walkway.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about accessory buildings on a property? Is
Not
that
required
typically-
at all. No, we do.
Yep.
So It depends on how many. Some houses are farm homes, they have 1 million, so we'll just exclude, it's too much. But a shed, we look at the shed and make sure that it looks, it's what it should be. It's a shed.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be perfect as
Sure.
long as it will do the job.
What about a swimming pool? Is that part of a home
No,
inspection?
not part of a home
Really?
inspection, no. But we would recommend that you contact a pool company. In the winter, there's nothing you can do. But some pool companies, they'll come out and they just stand there, they look at it for 2 minutes. I've seen a guy smoked a cigarette while he was looking at it and then asked him for $100. There are other pool companies that will come out and they get into scuba diving gear. They go into the water, they check the underground lines, and they do vacuum tests on the equipment night and day. So when you guys are hiring a pool person, make sure they're going to physically, literally check the parts, the components, not just take a peekaboo.
Sure. So again, staying on the outside of a house, there are things going on that you can't actually get up to. You mentioned a chimney. I don't suspect you climb the chimney. You just use
Binoculars.
binoculars. Or
Sure. We can't climb on a roof. It's against the law to walk on a roof without a release form from the seller. The seller would give us a hold harmless release, or the real estate listing agent. And my students in class, I recommend they never give, my agent students, do not give a release form.
and why is that?
Because if that inspector falls off that roof, there could still be a problem. Because number one, OSHA regulation says if you're above 6 feet, you need to be in a harness, or you need a net or a railing system to protect you. So when a home inspector's on a roof, I guarantee you, they're not meeting the OSHA requirement. So they shouldn't be on a roof. And when you stand on a roof, you're where your foot shouldn't be. Once a roof is installed, you shouldn't be dancing on it. It's brittle, it's hot in the summer, so it can melt, it can tear under your feet, and in the winter it'll crack. When you leave a roof walk, you're going to damage the roof or kill yourself. And that's why the law says we really are not supposed to be on a roof.
Right. So that's to protect the home inspector.
To
the way
protect everybody under the sun, you don't need to walk on a roof to know the roof condition once you're trained.
Really?
You can
Okay.
see it.
Yep.
I could pull in and within 4 seconds give you the age, life expectancy, and what the condition of that roof is.
What about solar panels on the roof? You must run into that.
Oh
now and
yeah,
then.
that could be a problem. Solar panels on the roof, I'm not in love with. I don't like it. I'm sure solar panel salesmen would say the opposite. But as a home inspector, we find in the attic leaks from the fasteners. In the winter, we find snow and ice that get under the panel and lift the panel. The panels aren't even effective when they have snow. There are only 6 hours in a day that the panel's going to possibly work, and it has to be a sunny day. If there's a leaf or two that fall or the panel's dusty, you could lose 70% of its ability to provide electricity.
Right.
So home inspectors are not required to look at panels at all. But we do have a note on the report that says we recommend our client discuss the panel and all of its components with the solar panel technician before moving forward in the transaction.
But if you're in the attic and you see water leaking,
We know there's an
That
issue.
ends up being
We
the
see
new
it too
report.
often. It's ridiculous.
sure.
I don't want to disparage the panels. If they're installed perfectly well, fine, but sometimes they're not.
Yeah, same story. I mean, it depends on the competency of whether it's a home inspector or a solar panel installer. You really want to know that they've got some experience doing what they do.
That's right.
All right, so now you've been outside the house. Now you go inside. What's typically when you walk into a house? What's the first thing that you look for?
The first thing we do, some folks might have a different program. I go into the kitchen and I turn on the appliances. We're not checking them. We're not gonna cook. We're not baking brownies, but we turn on, make sure the stovetop and the oven operate, and we run the dishwasher. The first thing that you should do is run all the water. Kitchen sink, all the sinks at the same time. It's required by the law. It's called a functional flow. And we're looking for pressure, and we're looking for blockages in the drains. One thing you shouldn't do, any home inspectors listening, don't run the water and leave a faucet running for too long. When a sink is blocked, and you're running around the house running the rest of the water, you can overflow that
Sure.
sink and cause a real problem.
That's your problem, right?
Functional flow.
So it brings up another issue. Home inspectors have insurance for things like that?
They have to.
expect.
You can't be a home inspector
Sure.
without it. The home inspectors also are required to have the client sign a contract. And the contract says that the inspector cannot be held accountable for quite a bit. A home inspection is not a guarantee. It is not a warranty. It is not an insurance policy. The state of Massachusetts says so. All it is an opinion of condition
Okay.
from someone. Now, hire someone who may have the better opinion, and that only comes with experience.
Right, so the home inspector is going to narrow down what really needs to be looked at. Now, you mentioned water. It's kind of an interior, exterior thing. What about a well outside? Is that part of a home inspection?
No, a home inspector should be able to do a well sample, well water testing, and we do. The issue is, I ask a lot of my home inspector students, where do you guys take the water sample from? Now, where do you think most home inspectors take a water sample from? Fill the bottles. From where in the house?
Probably the kitchen sink.
Which is completely unacceptable. Now, you're a real estate agent. You probably have seen that happen often. The EPA says a non-swivel faucet. So you have to go into the bathroom. So we find that the protocol is out of order so often.
And why is that?
It's
What's
ridiculous.
the swivel have to do with it?
Because any moving parts can cause the results to be inaccurate. Because of the swivel can cause some bacteria
Okay.
to come up through that particular faucet, which is not a true picture of what the well's doing.
So a lot of your time on the interior is spent in kitchens and bathrooms.
Kitchens, bathrooms, those are big tickets. But when we get down into the lower level, because we check every window, every door, the walls, the floors. Today, in one of the carpets, I noted that the carpet is damaged by an iron that had been placed. That people do their clothes on the floor, and they left a hot iron.
Yeah.
So we'll note all that. But in the lower level, and I call it that, because a lower level that's unfinished, that is subterranean, it's deeper into the earth, you can never call a basement. That's called a cellar. A basement is a living space, a place that could legally be lived in. A cellar is non-habitable. So I don't want to see a cellar renovated without special permits.
Now, what exactly is the difference?
The difference is how deep into the earth that lowest level is. So for instance, a Cape house or a Garrison would probably be a cellar, just the way they're built. Those older homes built in the 1950s. But a new house, a split today or a raised ranch, would be elevated high enough to be called a basement.
Okay.
So when we go into the lower level, this is when it all happens. We look at the framing and the superstructure and the foundation. The big tickets are down there. The heating, the water heater, electrical panel, the sewer pipes. Yes, on last week, the sewer pipe, black cast iron sewer pipe, everyone thought it was fine. People live in the home, a major crack in it, to the point where every piece of this sewer line has to be replaced. No one knew it because the crack was on the top of the pipe. So it didn't leak because those sewer pipes aren't full of pressure.
Sure.
So no one noticed it, but it's a major defect, and everyone got upset over that one.
All right, so some of the things you've described seem pretty serious. In Massachusetts, every home buyer is entitled to do a home inspection. But a home seller is, correct me if I'm wrong, not required to deal with any of the issues.
You're
Is
true.
that accurate?
100% true.
What about something that has to do with a serious code violation? Or
No. No, in Massachusetts, all a seller has to do in this state is to provide information about lead paint to the buyer if the home was built before 1978.
Right.
So if my buyer finds a problem, if we find problems in the home and my buyer wants to renegotiate, they may not be able to do that. It's up to the seller.
Right. It's part
They
of the
don't have to
negotiation.
do a darn thing. As a matter of fact, a seller can actually reject the home inspection, period. The original offer to purchase has a 10-day contingency for home inspection.
By law.
The lead part is, you're right.
Yep.
The lead portion. But the seller can turn away the home inspection part of it. That's a negotiable item.
Sure. And a buyer can make an offer on a house and waive their right to a home inspection.
They certainly can.
Don't need to do that.
Not many folks do, but
Right.
they could.
They could.
And I don't know any seller who hasn't let us in before. It doesn't look good. What are you trying to hide?
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
it's usually
So
fine.
speaking of sellers, as I mentioned at the beginning, typically it's a home buyer who hires the home inspector, but a home seller can do it as well. What would be the advantage to a home seller having you come in and do a home inspection before there was a buyer in the picture?
We do a lot of pre-sales. Many of the pre-sales are done because the seller's home has some issues and they're aware of it, but they don't know to what extent. During the pre-sale, I'm able to identify issues in the home the seller can fix before they market the property, which will save them a lot of money in the long run for sure. Whenever I find a problem at the sale for my buyer, the buyers tend to exaggerate the cost of the repair.
Sure.
Of course, if we did a pre-inspection, we would have had time to get a proper estimate and we would know exactly what was going on. The seller could either have fixed it or at least been more aware of the cost to repair.
So a seller can do home repairs themselves. Anyone who owns a home can fix their own home. But once it gets to the point where there's a buyer in the picture and a lender in the picture, now something that a seller might have been able to do, now you need a professional.
Good point.
A plumber, an electrician.
Sure.
To actually do
That's
the work,
great.
and that drives up the cost. So
I agree.
That argues for, if particularly an older home, to do a home inspection and get all the defects listed and disclose it to a prospective buyer.
Sure.
Say, here, this is what's wrong. Places the home seller in a stronger negotiating position.
It does.
Because typically, your inspection is used to a greater or lesser extent to often renegotiate the sale price of a home. I'm sure.
That's true.
Now let's say that's my I'm intending to do that, and I go to you and say, okay, Andy, you just pointed out that the hot water heater needs to be repaired. What does it cost to do that? Can you give me an answer to that question?
That's a good question because I can't. I know the cost, but it's against the law. It's a prohibited act for me in Mass or New Hampshire to give you an estimate at all. No ballpark, nothing.
Oh, why is that?
Can't do it.
Why is that?
Now, the reason is home inspectors may know the price, but probably not. They're going to toss out a number. Let's say water heater, which is going to cost you, could be $1,000 for a basic 40-gallon water heater. Not a high efficiency, you'll have to double it. So let's say a simple 40-gallon gas unit, 1,000. Well, many home inspectors might quote that too high. They might say 2,500. So the buyer walks away from a deal. The seller isn't willing to do that, and everybody is, it's not fair to all parties. I've had more buyers who get, I'm literally at the home inspection while they have a friend who's in the business giving them estimates, and I know that they're wrong. And these poor people never actually buy the house because the estimate's way off. It's not fair for the consumer to get an estimate from someone who can't literally back it up. When a real plumber comes out to a house and gives an estimate, they honor it.
Right.
That's the price. When a home inspector makes up an estimate, it could be too high, too low. It's not fair. That's the problem.
So
It's not fair.
home inspectors are not allowed to give prices, but if one does give a price, the best advice is really not to ignore that. I mean, that is really...
Yeah, we can't give a price. It's illegal. So if a home inspector did, they can't. They better not, or they'll lose their license. They cannot do it. If they get a price from a friend, I would want that friend to be in the business so he actually knows the real true.
stand by the price.
Oh, stand by the price. But I know that many realtors in my class tell me that home inspectors are giving prices. They can't. They may not be aware of the regulation or they don't care about the regulation. Can't do it.
Right. So you've got a home inspection. Now, so that's one aspect of the home inspection, to use it to make sure that there are things that a consumer might not observe, not trained to observe. Now they see serious defects in the home. It's not uncommon to retrade a deal based on that. But there's another value to a good home inspection to the home buyer after the sale.
Sure.
It allows them to do some planning.
Sure. They put it right on their refrigerator. They pluck away at it. It's a list of items, and our list is broken down in a way so they know what's most important. It's a tool they can use to just pluck away and get that house perfect over time. Some of the things I find are very dangerous, and it's life safety. It would have been very, very a shame for them to move in without addressing some of these problems. It would put their family at major risk.
And you note that in the home
Oh,
inspection.
this
those
is
items.
immediate concern right now, today, like an electrical problem, or an undersized wire, or some doubled up, or incorrect splices, or heating system with a flue pipe. I've seen the flue pipe not even in the chimney. It has fallen out.
So it's carbon monoxide.
Carbon monoxide billowing in.
Sure.
This is right today, right now. Turn this off. Get out of the house.
Really ought to be doing those things.
Oh, yeah.
Sure. So what's the it's typically or often someone has a house, a mid-century house, 50 years old. They've taken care of the house, but it's 50 years old. So they're selling their house. They know they've got an offer. They know there's going to be a home inspection. Is there anything that they can do to prepare for a home inspection? Besides fixing the
Sure.
obvious, but there are things that people often miss that they should.
You know, it's important. Have the heating system tuned up and have the receipt. Home inspectors love to see it was just serviced. Fantastic. You want to keep the house well painted and just tidy, whatever. Why are we in houses? You're an agent, I'm a home inspector. Why are we in homes during a home inspection where the dishes are still in the sink, the beds are not made? Organize this place. Remove the clutter. It's giant. It's important to make that house attractive to someone, and it's necessary that some folks can't afford to spend too much money, but you certainly can afford to organize it.
Sure.
A little paint, touch up. Very important. Get that heating system tuned up before we show up. That's a big deal.
That's a big item. And I know from my experience too, if you can't get to inspect a component of the house, you're going to note that you couldn't inspect it. So it could be a failure. It could really raise a suspicion on the part of a buyer and lose a deal. So pull things away from the wall.
I'll give you
the
some good
basements.
points. That's what you were getting at, and that's good. We have to get into the attic. Make it accessible. Take the clothes out of the closet. I need to get into that hatch. We want to make sure that if there's an electrical panel that's obstructed by a shelf or refrigerator, get it out of the way. Put your dog in a cage.
Okay.
Put your cats in cages.
Sure.
You don't need them running around the house. So that type of stuff is important.
Good, very basic stuff. Andy, we could go on. We're at the end of the show.
good.
You've given us a lot of good information. There's a lot to the home inspection. And I think the advice you would give people is make sure you know who you're dealing with, and
Sure.
they're well qualified to do it, as you are. So thanks very much for being here, and that's our show for today. Thanks for watching.